I think it's my time. Yes, I'm there. Thank you, Zlatko. Thank you very much. I forgive you for these 10 minutes you stole from our panel, and I promise to Anne not to stall absolutely 10 minutes with this panel. No, I'm just joking. And so, good morning, everybody, and good morning, distinguished guests. As citizens of the world, perhaps many of us have already begun to distance ourselves from the harsh memory of the pandemic. The countless lives lost, the lockdowns, and the profound impact on mental health, particularly for the most vulnerable among us, children, young people, and the elderly. Yet these experiences must remain at the core of our reflection, and I have to underline that this topic is always among us, thanks also to the choice made by Nizami Ganjavi International Center. So it is the responsibility of global and international organizations to set a clear agenda so that our interconnected humanity beyond the multipolar dynamics we are witnessing can be effective in prevention and ready in times of emergency. And this is precisely what citizens, if asked, expect from their leaders. The answer cannot simply be, it is complex, multipolarism, nationalism, populism, so politics has the duty to provide responses and to indicate pathways forward. So today, we are privileged to hear from Ms. Winnie Byanyima, the Executive Director of UNAIDS. So her experience and leadership remind us to the duty to listen carefully to the lessons she brings and to understand the path that humanity must take in 2025 with the tools and opportunities we now have to ensure that the tragedy of a global pandemic is not repeated in the same devastating forms we all witnessed just a few years ago. So, distinguished guests, it's time not to hear for your moderator, but to leave the floor absolutely to Winnie Byanyima, sorry for my Italian incorrect pronunciation, forgive me. So the floor is absolutely all to you.
Thank you. Thank you, moderator. You've done well on my name. I want to thank NGIC for inviting me to be here. Excellencies, distinguished participants at this high-level meeting. Indeed, it is a great honor to speak to you today at a critical time in global health and pandemic preparedness. It's hard to believe that just 5 years ago, most of us were trapped in our homes amid the devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's just 5 years ago. I say that because if you look at the world today, it sometimes feels like governments think that it's not going to happen again. But that isn't true. Researchers estimate that the chances of another pandemic as bad as COVID-19 in the next 10 years is about 1 in 5, 20%. In the next 25 years, it's about 50-50. And in the next 50 years, it's a near certainty. So we are in a world of pandemics. So what have we learned from COVID? UNAIDS convened a global council on inequalities, AIDS, and pandemics 2 years ago. It has been chaired by Professor Joseph Stiglitz, Professor Samaiko Marmot, and former First Lady of Namibia, Monica Gengos, who is a lawyer, a banker, and an activist. Our work, the work of that council, has revealed an inequality pandemic cycle. Inequality within and between countries is making the world more vulnerable to pandemics. making pandemics more economically disruptive and deadly, and making them last longer. And when pandemics hit, they increase inequality, fueling the cycle. There's a cycle of inequality, pandemic cycle. With increasing inequality, the world may be less prepared today than when COVID hit us. Pandemic preparedness must focus on how to break this inequality pandemic cycle. 4 things that the researchers on this eminent panel have brought out. 1, financing. It's so important that we remove the financial barriers, including the high extreme indebtedness of many developing countries. We need to remove the financial barriers in the global economic order to allow all countries sufficient fiscal space to respond to pandemics. During a pandemic, as a first step, when a pandemic hits, it's important to call for an urgent debt repayment standstill for distressed countries. We saw that during COVID, that countries that were highly indebted could not find good, sufficient, urgent debt relief to allow them the space to save lives. We should change that. This is a recommendation that comes from this council to make the world safer from future pandemics. We need decisively to reorient the international financial institutions, directing them to end pro-cyclical austerity policies and address the underlying structural flaws that lead to insufficient fiscal space to stop pandemics. Secondly, we also learned this from COVID. We need to address unequal access to medicines and vaccines because this fuels pandemics and prolongs them. We need to support local and regional production of medicines globally. And we need to build a new structure for research and development to ensure that the sharing of technology for public goods. We need to be able to establish a new set of incentive structures, including perhaps a pandemic prize, a fund, a big fund, to replace the patenting on the highest priority pandemic technologies. We need to decouple profits from these life-saving technologies, and there are ways to do this. We need to think creatively about how to reward innovation in a time of pandemics. We need to put aside serious financing, coordinated work for the production of life-saving medicines. It's a global public good. We should have a global way of doing this. We can't just hand it to the private sector and say that companies will decide for the world how lives will be saved in a pandemic. That was the second most important thing. The third is to use social protection and cross-sectoral actions to address the social determinants of pandemics. We need to surge social protection during health crises. We saw that too. Who was the most vulnerable? Older people. And where you had states that had strong social protection systems for the weak, the elderly, those with co-infections, they did better. Where there was nothing, there was more deaths. So social protection is key here. To make societies healthier and stronger when an outbreak occurs by addressing vulnerability outside the health system. This is critical. Fourth and last is to build trust, equality, and more efficient pandemic response by investing in community-based infrastructure for pandemics. Again, where countries had health systems that were inclusive, that reached people without discrimination, they did better to fight COVID. But where you had fragmented, privatized health systems, progress against COVID was slower. In fact, where you had people not trusting the health system because of the disconnection, you also had vaccine hesitancy. People didn't come forward to save their lives. So having communities well connected to a health system, being part of the delivery of services was key. We saw countries making fast progress, reaching high numbers of vaccination during that time because they had community infrastructure connected to health systems. Those are the 4 big things we learned from COVID, and that if the world takes to heart and puts action behind them, we should be prepared for the next pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I have we have a few minutes if you, well, no, because you move your microphone, but I had just, if it's possible, but also I think that you underline how the equality has to remain at the center of the pandemic prevention. This is absolutely important. So what is the more critic environment that you can see that obstacle that nowadays?
In the global system, the inequality to access to medicines is really a killer. We saw developing countries during COVID, particularly Africa, standing in the back of the queue, waiting to get some supply of vaccines as people died. Just the fact that a handful of companies could hold on to their life-saving technology, produce a little, and then richer countries could buy it up because the price is high, and others had none. And we were now before the WTO asking for a waiver of that the TRIPS waiver, that monopoly, to be able to produce generics. South Africa was able to produce the same vaccine as Moderna. Moderna was even a startup, paid 400% by the American government, but yet could hike its price, having been publicly funded, and deny life-saving medicines. South Africa came up with its own, but South Africa needed the TRIPS waiver to be able to produce without facing retaliation from the companies. But the TRIPS waiver never came. What came was something that looked like a waiver and that came too late, because a handful of countries held out, because the companies were there lobbying against a TRIPS waiver. We need something different going forward. That inequality was wrong, not only immoral, but it cost the world not only lives, but economic growth. And it's taken us long to recover because of that inequality in access to medicine. So we need a new system. We need WHO to declare a pandemic, and we need a TRIPS waiver to kick in immediately so that any country can make that life-saving vaccine or treatment. That's key. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and we are really on time. I will have tons of questions to ask you. And let me say before to open the panel number 6 to thank you personally on behalf of my friends that are suffering HIV, and they are HIV positive, but also I think that there is also in this room somebody that has some friends that is suffering this disease. And so really, thank you for your work, and I hope that our voice as Nizami Ganjavi can multiply your effort, your voice. We stand with you in your effort. Thank you very much indeed.